When we talk about the Antichrist, the mind fills with images of mystery, terror, and fascination. This is a figure that has transcended the pages of the Bible and prophecies to settle in the collective imagination as a being of unimaginable power, capable of manipulating and controlling humanity with unparalleled cunning. But what if I told you that the true nature of this character could be far more intricate, much closer, and even more familiar than we ever imagined? Could he already be among us, pulling invisible strings while preparing for his grand revelation? Throughout the centuries, names like Nostradamus have kept the flame of curiosity about this enigmatic figure alive. In his writings, which have been the subject of analysis and debate for generations, he mentions the emergence of three great leaders who would bring chaos and destruction to the world. According to many experts, Napoleon and Hitler could have been the first two of this trilogy of darkness. Now, this raises a disturbing question. Who will be the third? Could we already be living in the era when this final Antichrist makes his grand entrance? What makes Nostradamus' prophecies even more unsettling is the precision with which they describe the global impact of this third Antichrist. He would not be just another tyrant, nor a conventional dictator, but a figure who will alter the very foundations of civilization as we know it. Nostradamus does not speak of coincidences or accidental changes. His visions point to a meticulous plan, orchestrated by forces that transcend human understanding. The Bible, in turn, also sheds light on this figure. In the books of Daniel and Revelation, scenarios of a unified world government under 10 leaders are described, which, according to the scriptures, would be the prelude to the appearance of the Antichrist. Does this not resonate with current events? The modern world, with its technological advances, growing political tensions, and unstoppable push toward globalization, seems to fit perfectly into these prophetic visions. Nostradamus envisioned a time when nations would unite under a central authority, creating the ideal scenario for a supreme, charismatic, and astute leader to take control. International institutions such as the UN, the G20, and other global alliances are already laying the groundwork for a unified system. The idea of a single currency, a centralized government, and a globally interconnected network no longer seems like science fiction. It is a reality being built before our very eyes. But there is something more. According to these prophecies, this leader will not arrive in times of stability, but in the midst of a global crisis that will shake the foundations of societies. It could be an economic collapse, a war, or even a devastating pandemic. In those moments of despair and chaos, a leader with the ability to offer apparent solutions could win the support of the masses. But as the scriptures warn, his promises will be deceptive, designed to consolidate absolute control over all aspects of human life: political, economic, social, and spiritual. The figure of the Antichrist, according to the book of Daniel, is described as a master of deception, a manipulator who will impose a system where submission is disguised as salvation. This is where the similarities with Revelation become clearer, describing a beast that will be worshipped and served by the masses, oblivious to the true purpose behind its rule. Nostradamus also predicted a spirit of deception infiltrating society, preparing the ground for absolute control. This spirit would manifest in the corruption of values, ideologies that lead people away from the truth, and increasing dependence on systems that promise security in exchange for freedom. It is no coincidence that today, in the 21st century, we are witnessing unprecedented changes in the global landscape. The centralization of power is not just political or economic, it also affects spirituality. The masses, increasingly disconnected from their essence and ethical principles, become fertile ground for total control. Technological advances, from artificial intelligence to surveillance systems, provide unprecedented tools to impose a level of dominance that would have been unthinkable in other times. The possibility of a global government that manages every aspect of our lives no longer seems like a mere conspiracy theory. It is an option that many consider inevitable. What is most alarming is that, according to these visions, the Antichrist will not present himself as an openly sinister figure. On the contrary, he will appear as a savior, someone who offers solutions amid desperation, winning the trust and loyalty of the masses. But behind his charismatic facade will hide a dark agenda, one that seeks to transform not only political and economic structures, but also the very soul of humanity. The connections between biblical prophecies and Nostradamus' predictions lead us to an inevitable reflection. Are we already on the path to this scenario? The events shaping our world, from political polarization to the march toward globalization, seem to be steps toward a future that both texts describe with unsettling precision. If this is the case, the question is not whether the Antichrist will come, but when, and whether we will be prepared to recognize him. The first part of this analysis invites us to look beyond the obvious, to question the narratives we take for granted, and to seek the truth behind events. This leader will not emerge from nowhere. The stage must be perfectly set for his arrival, and every crisis, every global shift, every step toward a unified system could be paving the way for his coming. Are we ready to face this reality? Will we be able to discern the truth amid chaos and confusion? Biblical prophecies, as mysterious as they are fascinating, describe a central figure in the events of the end times, a cunning, blasphemous, and powerful entity identified in the book of Daniel as the little horn. This character will not only consolidate political power, but will take global control in a way that deeply resonates with the apocalyptic visions of Revelation. We are told of a system that will embody the beast, a structure of global dominance that will demand absolute loyalty and suppress any form of resistance. However, what makes these prophecies chillingly relevant to our times is how current events seem to align with these descriptions. Nostradamus, on the other hand, warns us about a spirit of deception that will precede the arrival of the Antichrist. This spirit is not something vague or ethereal. It manifests concretely in ideologies, movements, and systems that deviate from fundamental ethical principles. Whether in politics, religion, or culture, this spirit acts as a precursor, preparing the ground for absolute control. Movements that once seemed impossible to consolidate now find fertile ground in a world that appears increasingly disconnected from its spiritual foundation. Polarizing ideologies, the corruption of traditional values, and the spread of distorted beliefs are creating the perfect breeding ground for this figure to rise to power. In this scenario, technology becomes a key tool. Today, we live in an era where every movement, decision, and thought can be monitored, cataloged, and analyzed. Technological advances have not only transformed our way of life, but have also opened the door to an unprecedented level of control. Mass surveillance systems, artificial intelligence, and centralized digital currencies are just some of the tools that could be used to consolidate the power of a centralized world government. It is unsettling to consider how these innovations, originally designed to improve our lives, could be manipulated to establish a system of total control, just as the scriptures and Nostradamus predicted. Meanwhile, the march toward globalization does not stop. Borders are becoming increasingly blurred, economies are more interconnected than ever, and international institutions are gaining unprecedented power. Organizations such as the UN and the IMF are at the center of global decision-making, and international treaties seem to be shaping a future where individual sovereignty will be replaced by a centralized system. All of this may seem like natural progress in an increasingly connected world, but through the lens of prophecy, it appears as the prelude to the emergence of a figure who will seek to unite the world under his rule, using both crisis and hope as his main weapons. In this landscape, the impact of moral and spiritual confusion cannot be ignored. Immorality seems to be reaching levels never seen before, and spiritual disorientation has become a widespread problem. Many people, in search of purpose and meaning, cling to superficial ideologies or movements that promise quick solutions, but only drive them further away from a solid spiritual truth. This moral void is exactly what the prophecies describe as the fertile ground where the Antichrist will plant his roots. This leader will not only seek political and economic control, but also spiritual dominance, presenting himself as a savior in the midst of chaos while his true agenda remains hidden. The biblical scriptures warn us that this system of domination will not be obvious at first. It will be a system of subtle deception, disguised as progress, security, and stability. The masses, seduced by promises of peace and prosperity, will voluntarily submit, unaware that they are giving up their most essential freedom. The book of Revelation describes how this system will demand worship and total loyalty, using technology as a means to impose absolute control. The prophecy of the mark of the beast is especially relevant in this context, as it describes a system where no one will be able to buy or sell without accepting this mark, a concept that resonates with the increasing digitization and centralization of modern economies. But the prophecies are not just warnings, they are also calls to action. In a world where the forces of deception seem to be gaining ground, the scriptures and Nostradamus' predictions urge us to reflect on our choices and strengthen our values. This is a time for discernment, for seeking the truth, and for resisting the currents that try to steer us away from a solid spiritual path. The prophecies remind us that, although the power of the Antichrist will seem overwhelming, it will not be invincible. There will be those who maintain their integrity and fight for the truth, even in the darkest moments. As we reflect on the meaning of these warnings, we must remember that the Antichrist will not represent the end of history, but the beginning of a new global reality. A reality that will test our ability to distinguish between truth and lies, between justice and oppression, between light and darkness. The scriptures and predictions converge on a clear message. We are on the threshold of a monumental change, and the decisions we make as individuals and as a society will define the course of our future. At this critical juncture in humanity, it is essential to stay informed and strengthen our faith and values. Prophecies are not meant to instill fear, but to offer guidance for navigating uncertain times. They remind us that, although the Antichrist will seek to dominate the world, he will not have the final word. In the end, truth and justice will prevail, but it will be up to each of us to decide which side of history we want to stand on. Are we prepared to face these challenges? Will we have the wisdom and courage to recognize the truth amidst the chaos? The fate of future generations is in our hands. The prophecies invite us not to be mere spectators, but active participants in this crucial moment in history. It is a call to reflection, to action, and above all, to hope. Because even though the times ahead promise to be challenging, they also offer the opportunity to rediscover what it truly means to be human, beings capable of resisting deception, fighting for the truth, and building a future based on values that transcend time and circumstances.